Hello and welcome back to Rev Real Estate School. I'm your host, Michael Montgomery, and today we're joined by Rebecca Higgs. And now Rebecca and I, we actually go back a few years and we work together. And I watched Rebecca actually go out and produce, and she sells real estate in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And her level of service to a client is like something I've never seen before. And the majority of her business is driven through repeat and referral. And as we jump into this podcast and video, you'll learn a lot more about how her process has actually driven a lot of these referrals. We're really excited to have her here, and she's a very, very high producer. Rebecca, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for asking me to join.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. So
I know.
First off, just to give the listeners an understanding of where we're coming from, maybe take us to your number of families that you helped in 2021.
So I ended up helping 74.
74. And your average sale price?
I'd say just over $1 million.
Yeah, just over $1 million.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's not familiar, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, it tends to be a fairly expensive area. And doing that many deals as a solo agent and with an average price of that caliber, like that's a lot of deals. That keeps a person really, really busy. So I'm really curious as to like how you actually found your way to this originally. So what's your story and path into real estate?
So it started in 2006. I was living in Calgary, actually, and was at University of Calgary. And my parents had moved to Ontario from British Columbia, and they wanted me to join them. So a few days before I ended up leaving, my parents called me and said that they'd just bought a house in Southeast Oakville, which is a beautiful area in Ontario. And they were really looking forward to me seeing it. And it was condition on home inspection and financing. When I ended up arriving, I literally landed in Toronto, drove straight to the property. They were walking me through this house, and it was a brand new build. It was gorgeous. And they were like, well, we're going to do an extension here. We're going to do a swimming pool. The furniture won't fit in this type of house, but we'll go and get new furniture. And the more that I was walking through it, I was like, you're changing so much of a new house. And I'm often one to say to clients, if you're trying to make a house work so much, it just doesn't work. And so I told my parents this, and they were devastated because they loved the house. And we started then looking at other properties that kind of catered more to what they were looking for. And I had no experience in real estate whatsoever. I was very much on the university train, and we ended up finding a house that just matched everything that they were looking for. So that was kind of my first experience. And then a couple of months after that, my brother bought a place in Ottawa. He was going to university up there. And I drove up there. We drove to neighborhoods. There was just something in that process of both with my parents and my brother that I just knew. And so I drove home from Ottawa, sat my parents down and said that real estate was my calling and I really wanted to get into it. It devastated them, I'll be honest with you. But it was something I just knew. Like it just wasn't a question. Like I knew this was the industry for me. It was a lot more beneficial for me to, again, recently being moved to Ontario, to get in a good brokerage. At that time, it really mattered about the brokerage that you worked for and affiliating with a seasoned agent as an assistant. So I kind of got to learn the ropes, the neighborhoods, and kind of the whole process behind it. So that was a decision that I made at 21.
At 21. And I'm curious, take me back to like those first few years. Did you start to see success right off the bat? Did it take some time to grow the business?
So I was an assistant for a couple of years and I'd got licensed at that point, but I was still very much under the agent's wing of doing deals, helping her out, doing showings. But it allowed me to do open houses. And I think that really was the fundamental open houses and leases. That was the foundation of my business at the very beginning. When I then went out on my own, obviously I was petrified to make that decision, like most people can be. But I just knew that I was ready and it was time for me to do it. And you have to kind of bite the bullet at some point. It was challenging, but I think I was also able to learn so much from the agent that I worked with, both good and bad, right? You know, you learn good things and then you also learn business practices that you don't want to take into your own business. So I think that really gave me a leg up on gaining that experience.
Now, as we're getting into the current times, times. What are you doing right now in order to generate leads and continue the wheel turning for yourself?
So most of my business now, as you said, is repeats and referrals. So for me, it's the touch points of what I do. I would probably say to anybody, the most important thing in real estate is follow-up and building relationships and rapport. My clients aren't clients. I mean, I had coffee with a client today who I helped buy 9 years ago. She's in her mid-50s. I consider her a very good friend of mine. She actually gave me crystals today because she knew that I had an injury. So she actually said, I've got you a gift. Those are the touch points of just being front and center, but being genuine. I don't go and have coffee in the intention of getting a lead. It's just continuing to build that rapport and that relationship. So I'd say touch point is my biggest thing. And I do it with coffee. We're dropping off pumpkins right now. I do advent calendars. We do the home show. I do follow-up emails. How are you doing? Any updates? So I think that really is very important to continue to make sure people think of you.
Totally. I love that. And just to kind of get into the details of it, how do you determine who you're going to follow up with and when? Do you have a structure to that?
I don't. And I probably should get a better system in place. I could tell you clients that I helped buy 15 years ago, and there's certain clients that you just build such a good relationship with. I have everything in Google Contacts, and so they're all categorized. So I go through that once a month. For certain people that are kind of like my top A clients or have always, given me repeats and referrals, I probably touch base with them once a month. For other people that I've assisted over the years, it's probably every 4 or 5 months, checking in, seeing how they're doing.
I know we're getting specific here, but what exactly are you saying to these people every month?
It's just, how are you doing?
Yeah, just simple.
Yeah. How's life? How's your long weekend?
And is your form of communication, are you calling these people, texting them, emailing them, all the above?
Mostly email. Yeah, mostly email. So I reached out to, I think, probably 14, 15 people already this week, and I'm seeing them in a couple of weeks.
And so then you set up a coffee or something just to catch up.
Prior to COVID, I think I was doing at least 3 coffees a week.
Amazing. Really interesting.
Obviously, since COVID, that kind of put a bit of a wrench in the plans for everybody. But I was still reaching out to people and making sure that they were doing okay during those challenging times.
That's really, really good. And I know this might be actually a kind of tricky question to answer. So when we're talking about building rapport and actually building connection with an individual, I know it can be kind of difficult to put our finger on exactly what's causing that. But is there anything that comes to mind for you if someone was to ask you, how do you build such strong relationships with your clients? How do you turn them into friends?
I think it really starts during the process of looking or selling. Buying or selling. I really like to have fun with my clients. I got an email from a client a couple of days ago, and she actually wrote, she said, "I'm so sad that we're not looking for another house because I really miss you." That, to me, it just warms my heart. She also gave me a lovely testimonial saying that I was honest, but also witty, which I was like, I've waited 15 years for somebody to acknowledge that. But I just like to have fun. I'm human. We're all human. And I think that, showing up and, obviously if you want to wear a suit and all of that, that's absolutely fine. But I will always, reference my husband, reference my children. I make them a part of my family. And I think I've found to be so important. And it's really what fills my cup, that I know it's not just a transaction, that I'm building relationships with people that will be, hopefully in my life for a long period of time.
Absolutely. Coming back to the touch points concept, you went through a couple of things that you're doing throughout the year. I know you actually do some amazing pop-bys and things like that for clients throughout the year. Yeah. So I guess between the coffees and the follow-ups, what sort of pop-bys or touch points are you doing for, say, your whole database throughout the year, and how many?
So in February, we do the home show tickets. I always send an email. Then we mailed the tickets out. Then I do a follow-up with them afterwards, asking them if they got any good ideas for the home show. Then we're doing pumpkins right now. So we've got 347 pumpkins being delivered. Then we do the advent calendars, and then just coffees as well. You never want to touch on doing the exact same thing. So doing something that gives value to people as well. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't drop pumpkins off. And that was a year. Unfortunately, certain things had happened, so I just wasn't able to get around to it. I probably had about 30 or 40 people reach out saying, "We never get pumpkins because we're expecting yours to be delivered on our door. Where is it?" So then I had to scramble and drop a few off. But the fact that people think about it and remember that and actually don't go and buy it because they know that I'm going to deliver it, that in upon itself makes me happy.
Totally. I love that story. And are you you like in person going, knocking on the door, dropping off the pumpkin? Are you having them delivered? How does that process look?
So I was doing them myself for many, many years. In the last couple of years, we now just have a delivery. We have a tag that goes on it and we just put it on their front doorstep.
Amazing. So it seems very achievable in many ways, right? Like if we're able to touch base with people a few times throughout the year with, say, a drop by of some sorts or a giveaway, plus a few coffees, you're able to scale this amazingly large business in a very competitive space. Yeah. The other thing about Toronto, it's very competitive and on par with like the most competitive real estate spaces in North America, if not the world. So it's like these personal connections go such a long way. You also, what I noticed from you, from working closely with you, is you also have a very keen eye when it comes to actually listing and what you do for listings. So I think oftentimes, especially as newer agents, we think, okay, we put the property on the market and then we kind of let the price do the rest of the work for us. But what I was really interested in when I saw your business practice, producing at an extremely high level, but still going into each individual listing and making suggestions and things like that. What is your process when you're thinking of taking care of a seller?
So for me, I just want from start to finish it to be as comfortable for them and carefree as possible. So I often go in, I give my recommendations. I often always see how they're reacting to it, but explain at the end of the day, I want to bring the house back to its full glory and to present it in its best light. I will give you my recommendations. What you're willing to do is great. If you're not willing to do, that's okay as well. But from the moment that I get those keys from you, it becomes my house. And I really want to bring it to in its best light as possible.
That personally, I found that to be a hard conversation at times. You know, you're going into a seller's house and you're like, hey, this wall is ugly. We got to do something about it. Yeah. Of course, you have a very good way with your words, but how do you approach that conversation so that you're not, say, like insulting a seller?
Well, I tell them to come over to my house and just say, if you want to see a mess, if you want to see things that would be done, you know, I've bought and sold properties myself. And I also have done exactly what I've always done. And I have to take my own advice. And again, I think if you're positioning it that you're trying to get maximum dollar and how we live is not how we sell, it allows people to understand and kind of rationalize the concept of what I'm trying to do. Every property I do, it is a transformation. I mean, for me, a house is art, right? It's just bringing it to its like beautiful state. And I think that's what I love to showcase. And that's really what I explain to any prospective seller.
And then do you have contractors that do this work for you, or do you ask the seller to go out and do it? Do you handle everything? How do you think about the work?
Yeah, I handle everything.
Everything, which is, I guess that kind of leads us into our next topic here, which is around how the heck do you manage your time? You have young kids, you have an extremely busy life, handle a lot of listings, a lot of buyers. How are you able to manage all of this and then still also go into every listing and make suggestions in each individual room?
I got a lot of energy.
You do.
I don't know. I love it, right? And I do have it. I mean, I've got Alex who works on my team. She's absolutely amazing, helping to facilitate. I have a buyer agent who recently joined. So I think collectively, all of us together, I always will go in and do the initial phone call, like the consult, but I do like overseeing things. I do like to have things in a certain way. So I think for me, I just like to be a part of that process.
Yeah, that's awesome. When going to this consult concept, what does a normal consult look like for you?
So it's normally just walking into the property, obviously introducing myself, and then just kind of walking around and saying, you know, I am going to speak freely and give you my recommendations of what I will be doing. Then we can talk about what you're comfortable with us doing and what you're not. But I always put them at ease and say, I don't want you to worry about it. I will take care of everything. So even when it is a listing presentation, from boxes being delivered at the door to once they've moved out, come and getting the painters in, getting the stager in, the photographer, handyman, everything is taken care of. That they literally can just go about and do their job and they can let me do mine.
Exactly. And do you ever have sellers that are saying, okay, well, if we're going to replace, you know, XYZ in this home, I want an extra $20,000. Do sellers say that ever? Or have you been able to phrase it in such a way that that sort of objection doesn't come up?
It doesn't really come up that much. I think I go in prefacing these improvements are going to, what you're going to put in, you are going to be getting out of it. But I often don't talk about pricing when I first go into a listing presentation, just because I need to see the property. So I always go in, do a walkthrough, and then I say I'm going to analyze everything and then get back to them on value. And then when I do get back to them on value, that's already taken into account the improvements that I've mentioned.
And how have you been handling clients more recently that they thought their home was worth 1.5 and now it's worth 1.2. How are you approaching those conversations?
Those are tough conversations to have. And I'm definitely having them more frequently now. I think for me, it's managing expectations and explaining ultimately if the value of your property's gone down, but then you're buying in that same market, it really just works out to be the same anyways. So I think it's how we articulate it, but also not a doom and gloom scenario of you've lost X number of dollars. But it's again, managing expectations. I also don't really want to be taking on a listing if the seller does have unrealistic expectations, because that would only allow me to fail them, which is obviously not what I intend to do.
Yeah. What about on the buying side? Is there anything that you do to help buyers or any conversations that you have with buyers that differentiate your business versus others, do you think? Or even certain things that you do with buyers that have been very impactful?
So I think when I first meet with a buyer, I think the most important thing, and it's something in this industry that isn't often given up, which is references. So I always say, I'd like to give a few references of people who have worked with me who also maybe didn't know me. If it's a repeat or referral, then that's a different story. But if it's somebody that I don't have any relationship with or any connection with, then I always say, I'd like to give you a couple of references. And then you can ask them about the style of how I work. I can say to anybody, do I think I'm a good agent? I think so. But you have to hear it from people that have actually experienced working with me. So I think that's a key component that not a lot of agents do. Also sending previous listings that I've done. I think that's an important thing that agents should be doing. And I'd probably say one of the things that differentiates myself is when I normally like to go out 6 or 7 times with a client. And so I really get a good sense of what they like and what they don't like. Then moving forward, when a listing comes on the market, I like to find the listings before they do. There's so many platforms out there that it's just automatic. And I feel that does kind of take away from the service that we should be providing. So I'm constantly on MLS. And when I see something come out, I send it to my clients. If they say, yes, it looks interesting, myself or, somebody who works on my team will be there within an hour. We'll take a video with our commentary. Sometimes mine is tripping upstairs and who knows what I do, but it's fun. And I send them the video. And I think that's a level of service, both as whether you're a new agent or a seasoned agent, the more houses you go into and see what it sells for, the better you are at getting the gut sense on values.
Totally. Like such a great way to educate yourself too.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you send me a property. Do you then say, hey, I'm booking this for in an hour, I'm going to go take a video, even if they're in your same city, so they could be at that listing. Do you do this video tour in order to provide commentary before they book the showing in person?
So if I send them the listing and they like the look of it, then I just say to them, please ask me to go. If I send you a listing and you like it, just ask me to go inspect it and I'll go and inspect it for you. Whenever I go and inspect a property, I never view it beforehand. I literally open the door, my camera's on, and you get exactly what I feel about it, good and bad. And sometimes there's quirky corners and nooks and, I'm like, well, that's kind of strange. But you're getting my first reaction and not a scripted, here's the dining room, here's the living room. You're getting the first-hand commentary of what my thoughts are of the house. And it eliminates both evenings, with my children that I want to be spending time with. So if something from a video eliminates me showing them, that's obviously beneficial for me. But it also gives them a higher level of service that I'm not wasting their time as well.
Typically agents would say, well, let's just go have a look at it. But your preferred process is, hey, I'm going to go have a look at it during your own time, during the day when the kids are busy or something like that, which then when you're going out and looking at homes, you're looking at homes that specifically they very, very likely contenders versus just kicking tires ultimately. And then from there, as far as, so then the client buys, let's say, but is there a certain cadence that you follow up with them once they've actually purchased? Do you have a follow-up process after they've actually moved into their home?
So once they've bought the property prior to closing, we send an email just kind of next steps. Then a week before closing, we send a checklist, just friendly reminder, making sure that you've, ticked all these boxes. Then the day of closing, I always go myself with I have an English basket full of candy. I actually have one on the table over there that I have to drop off, but I go drop it off. And then after a week, I'm just, how's the move? Are you unpacked? How's it looking? And then about a month afterwards, I always ask to stop by and that I'd love to see the house.
That touch point's really, really key. And oftentimes I think we think we're being disruptive for somebody who's moved in. But even when I moved into a home and somebody wants to come by and look at it, I'd love to show it off.
Yeah. I find that, I know for myself, when you work so closely with people for so long, when you've then bought, I have withdrawals, right? They become a part of my life. They know my kids, they know my family, they know everything. And well, not everything, but a lot. and so when that transaction's done, I actually probably go more into like a panic of, oh my gosh, I'm not going to see them again. And I've spoken to a number of clients about this, and they equally feel the same of, I speak to you every single day. You know my finances, you know my children, you know my life, like you know a lot. You become a therapist at certain points. And so they also kind of get that withdrawal. So I think it's something for both of us, but also, as I said, they then become friends and come over for dinner, have drinks in the back garden, meet my children. And it kind of just becomes full circle of it's not just a client or a transaction.
No. And this concept of friendship, I think is really key as well, where it takes it away from just the house purchase, especially when you're like meeting families and kids and things like that. Your conversation then drifts from real estate to life. And then that's where the real deep connection starts to form, right? When you're just talking about the transaction, it's important. But when you know my kids, that's a different level of personal connection.
Normally, I've been doing phone calls. Like in the last couple of years, I just did phone calls. Now I've been doing handwritten cards, and not a lot of people nowadays do handwritten cards. Nobody really gets a birthday card in the mail anymore. And so I've been doing that, and the response and the amount of people that write to me saying, thank you so much for the birthday card, it really means something. Or if I find out, their house anniversary, well, obviously I know that, always send a card at that point, or their wedding anniversary, or when their children's born. Again, it just it's a human touch and a personal one.
And we think oftentimes that they're just not well received, but I keep handwritten cards for a strangely long amount of time. So thinking back to your career now, what are some struggles that you would say you encountered as you've been growing your career?
A big struggle is probably rejection. And that's a key aspect of this business. I mean, it gives you really good thick skin. It's a humbling business because you can have the best year one year and the worst year the next. The market can adjust. We're all going through that right now. But I think when you do get the rejection, like for me, it fuels me. And it's like, okay, I lost one, I'm going to gain two. And that's always kind of been my mentality. But sometimes there are hard knocks, and it can happen from one morning I get a deal and it's like you piece it together. And then 2 hours later, somebody, says, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to work with another agent. And you go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. And so I think it's maintaining that consistency of positivity of if you put in the work, you'll get the reward. And it's not today, it's not tomorrow, it may be next week or next month. But I think that was initially a struggle for me. Plus I was 21 years old. And actually the person I had coffee with this morning, that was obviously 9 years ago, I helped her buy. When I first met her, it was a lease. And she asked for my ID. I look young anyways. I got ID'd not that long ago, like 2 days ago, but I looked young and I wore the suit and I did everything that I thought, I should be doing as an agent. And they ID'd me in the lobby of the Shangri-La Hotel. I'll never forget it. And they said, are you even old enough to be a real estate agent? And I remember getting into my car and it knocked me. And it was like, oh my God, can I do this? I think it was 3 months later, we bought a $1.8 million house.
Amazing.
And they didn't want a lease anymore. They wanted a house. And now I had coffee. They gave me crystals. Like we're now lifelong friends. So I think that to me was a humbling experience of, rejection. And I'd probably say also burnout. Burnout, that's a real thing in this business. We can go for a long period of time, but you do have to take some time out. And that has been something that I did experience back in 2014. That I was going at a very high volume, and I was also still kind of helping the other agent out that I was working with, and I was just spread too thin.
And how did you overcome that? First off, you noticed it coming, but then how did you go about handling burnout with an increasing number of inquiries that are coming in?
I just had to start taking a window of time each day for myself. I also then started putting my phone on silence at certain times in the evening. But if there was active clients that were working with me, they would always be able to have access. There would be times I would be getting phone calls at 11 o'clock at night that somebody's basement flooded. And who do they call? And I'm like, not me, please. And so I think, and I loved it because I became the point of contact for everybody. But at a certain point, it's like, there's got to be a better balance with this. And so I think I kind of learned it at that point in 2014 that I can put systems in place as best as I can to still give me the time that I need to have the energy to do what I do.
Yeah, for sure. It's a hard decision to make, but you can lose your passion for the business then too when you end up burning out. That's what happened to me when I burnt out. I was like, I started to lose my passion around it. Yeah. And then it just made it so much more difficult to go to a listing presentation. As soon as you get that back, it's a completely different career. What are some errors that you think newer agents or just generally speaking agents tend to be making in the business? And this is probably less focused on the technical aspect of drafting an offer and more when they're building their business. What are some issues that you see coming up with agents?
I think it's just wanting it overnight, like overnight success, and not realizing that you have to put in the work and the time and do things without the intention of being paid for it. It will come around. I actually have a listing coming out on next week. I recently sold a property in Liberty Village. A gentleman called me, was just asking advice. I thought he was an agent, to be honest with you. He sounded like an agent. And he was asking me, strategy, and do I stage? Do I do this? And I was on the phone with him for 22 minutes until I then said, is this the first listing that you're doing? And I'd been given all the advice, like no problem. And after 22 minutes, and I asked him that, I said, is this the first listing? He said, no, I'm not an agent. I'm a seller and I'm inquiring. He said, I have a good friend of mine who's a real estate agent and I'm going to work with him. And I said, well, at least I'm a good agent because I've been given all this advice for free thinking you were another agent. And I said, look, if you want me to come and look at the property and give you my advice, I'm more than happy to. I know you've got a relationship. I'm not going to step on toes, but if you just need a secondary look, no problem. So I met with him on Thanksgiving Monday. We were walking. I was telling him, recommendations of what I would do. And we got to the rooftop and I said, look, make sure your agent stages this. And he says, no, you're going to be my agent. He said, I want to hire you. And that literally came. I went there on Thanksgiving. I left my kids. And it was not with the intention of getting the listing. It truly was just to help him out. And because of that, I ended up getting the listing. I'm not sure if he's told his friend yet.
That'll be a hard call. Yeah.
That was going to be a hard one. But I think it's that. Always help people. And whether it's another agent, whether it's just giving any advice to anybody, because it does turn around and it does come back to you.
At this stage in your career, some agents, actually most agents would probably be like, oh, talk to your agent, see you later, click, sort of thing. But you actually, a holiday in Canada, you are taking off from your family in order to go see somebody has already indicated they have an agent. Like where does that come from? And you said that you weren't necessarily going to solicit his business. You were just going to help somebody. Is that the mindset that you had? Was just like, oh, I'm just going to help this person? Yeah. Is that where it comes from?
Yeah. I just wanted to help him. And I really feel some of the things he was saying, and he hadn't signed a contract. I just want to put that out there. It was a friend. Yeah. It was very, he was saying that it was going to be 10 to 15,000 to stage the property. And in a market like what we're in right now, it actually pains me when I see properties that aren't presented correctly. I think it's such a disservice. And some of the advice that was given by this agent, I just thought it's not right because it's going to affect the bottom dollar. And when we're in a market shifting like we're in right now, I've always said the 3 key ingredients of selling is presentation, timing, and strategy. When the timing is off, you've got to make the presentation and the strategy, like you've got to knock it out of the park in order for people to overlook the fact that the timing may be a little bit skewed at the moment. So I think that was kind of my intention of just going there to help him so that he wasn't leaving money on the table.
That's an amazing story. And it really shows that if we're willing to do these things, that even if they don't necessarily have dollar signs at the end of the road, there's a very good chance, actually high likelihood, that person wouldn't have used you. But because you did this, you're putting yourself in situations that will increase your luck. Like you're just putting yourself in situations that will increase the chance of you being lucky. In this case, he chose you, but it's because you put yourself in a situation like this and did end up putting in the additional work. So another question for you, kind of thinking back to, let's say you were advising a newer agent, let's say maybe 1 to 2 years in the business, and they said to you, Rebecca, I don't have a huge database of repeat and referral. I don't know maybe a ton of people in my market. I don't have a huge marketing budget, so I'm not going to go, do a ton of online advertising or anything. How can I go about starting to generate business?
I would say probably affiliate with a brokerage that maybe has seasoned agents that you can ask if anybody needs help with leases, open houses. I think that was absolutely. The leases and the open houses were a foundation of my business. And I absolutely loved open houses. I still love them. I'm also not, when somebody walks in, do you have an agent or what? I just want to have fun with people and make people feel comfortable and at ease. And if they choose to work with me, great. But just, I'd say that would probably be my number one piece of advice is try and reach out to agents and just see if you can assist them in any way, shape, and possible or shadow them.
I think that's an underutilized technique to start your business. Or even if you're not starting, like even if you're trying to grow your business, there's so many agents that inquiries come in that they're just not able to handle. But oftentimes like those inquiries will go, they're not just going to go to some random agent in the office. They're going to go to the agent who's showing a level of interest in their business and wanting to grow and wanting to learn from them. Yeah. And then what's one thing that you see agents doing right now that you think they should stop?
I'm not a big fan of cold calling or door knocking.
Have you tried
personally.
both?
Once I think I tried cold calling.
Yeah,
I've gone to a number of Buffini conferences. You know, I will never forget when he said, if you're a door knocker and a cold caller, it's transactional based and it's a turn and burn. And if you're a door knocker and a cold caller, you're probably always going to be doing that. Where if you build the foundation and do the repeats and referrals, the business will come to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can then choose who you want to work with down the road if they're kind of like-minded. So, I mean, each to their own on how people want to do it. For me, it's just not a style that I would be comfortable with. I also like to conduct myself how I want to be treated. Mm-hmm. If somebody comes and knocks on my door, I want them, please leave.
That's fair. Away. And I mean, like the amount of times in real estate that we get cold called, I don't think I've ever bought something from a cold caller. No. I can't think of one time that I ever have. It just doesn't tend to happen, right? Yeah. Rebecca, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful to hear how you've gone about building your business. I love the fact that you are so focused on this repeat and referral. And really, like, one of the main takeaways that I have is just you haven't overcomplicated it. You know, like so many times in real estate, we're like thinking, how can we segment in so many different ways and how can we target this and target that? When you haven't overcomplicated, you've taken like the simple nature of building a strong human relationship with somebody. And you have these repeated follow-ups and touch points, and the business just flows into you. And I think sometimes as real estate agents, we can overcomplicate our business when it really just simpler than we think. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael.